Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free, Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
This is Stress-Free Living. Hello, I'm Ray Samich, and I'd like to introduce you all to my dear friend, my radio co-host, my colleague, and my spiritual brother, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you this fine day?
Wonderful, Ray. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. Always great to be with you and with all of our listeners and our viewers, wherever you may be, anywhere around the world. We hear from you occasionally as I meet you out in the real world, out in the streets, shopping or visiting some places. You'll come across and you'll say hello to me, and I am so honored when you do. But we know that we have listeners that we never meet face to face. A lot of you that are all parts of the world listening on the internet. And a lot of you now, more and more people are catching our YouTube channel, where we have stored many of our past programs that you can listen to or watch. And that is on the YouTube station, Stress-Free Living Radio. So whether you're listening through the internet or radio or catching us on a replay, we welcome you. Thank you so very much for being with us. Ratanjit, we had talked in our last show about teaching and studenting, if you'll allow me to create that word, and how very often the students learn more from the teacher than the teacher learns from the student, whether it's practical knowledge or whether it's theoretical knowledge. There's always learning that goes on in between. And when we talk about teachers and students, we also could be talking about parents and children. We could be talking about bosses and employees, staff members under the boss. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a classroom setting. It could be any situation where there's a supervisor and someone below the supervisor, or a parent and a child, whatever that relationship might be. So the question is, for today's show, who really learns more? Can the teacher become a student? Is the student already a teacher? And is that the way it's supposed to be? I mean, we think of the teacher going to classes and getting all their degrees and continuing studies and teaching to become get their master's and get their doctorate. No, you would think that they are at the highest level of teaching and knowledge, and yet how can they learn from the students that they teach?
The simple question is, we all went to school and college and all that. So we had many teachers, but we remember only a few, right?
True.
So
yeah.
What if we understand what is special about those people who we remember? They relate to us on a personal basis. They share with us. Their whole psychology is not being superior to them, being friendlier, being compassionate, being kind, so those are the teachers who we remember. So whenever in the mind of a teacher, you end up sharing that information rather than being a superior and lecturing them and telling them the information, I know it better, and do not encourage them to understand, do not ask questions, do not get them involved, do not make them feel better. We do not remember those teachers. So whenever we become from teacher to a student mode, in other words, we work with students to explore everything together. the information is much more planted in the mind of our student. They better understand than otherwise by giving them information. So that is where this student, the teachers have to become a student to teach. This is one point.
And that's a good point. You made me think back about some of the teachers that I did have through schooling. And some of the most brilliant ones, I respected them. I respected their brilliance. And I remember even talking to my friends about saying, wow, this person is just amazing, the knowledge they have, the intelligence that they have. But respect is different than appreciation or love, or referring to them as a favorite. None of those became my favorite teachers. The most brilliant ones that knew the most, I respected their knowledge, but they weren't my favorites because I couldn't really relate to them. They always stayed up here and I was always down there, even as much as I tried to absorb the information. So I think you're right. They were excellent in terms of what they knew, but they really weren't excellent teachers in terms of converting that knowledge into a shareable form that I was able to really learn like I could have.
Yes.
So okay, so that's the first point. So and I guess let's stay with that for a second, because this show is designed not just for teachers and students. This show today, our thought process behind it is for anybody who's in that capacity of sharing information, telling information. So there's also a lesson to be learned for parenting there, right? I mean, if you just yell at your child and say, do this, you're not going to get the response that you would get with another process, another way of doing that.
So in real life, people who become your favorite uncle, your favorite aunts, or your favorite cousins and all that, they generally respect you. And if you ask a question, they go into depth to explain that so that they share the information, not that you get a feeling that they are superior. So they are exploring this thing together with you. So the second fact, which is very important, is the secret of learning is to teach. Until you share, you don't learn. So when I graduate from I for a short time, I was teaching, I was a lecturer in the university. So that is the time there were new challenges which I was confronting. In order for me to teach, I have to be a student first. I have to learn that subject to a degree that I do not confuse them. I basically became a student first again in order to teach. So you can only become, there is another part of our life which is very important, and which is how we are designed. We are designed by nature to operate in the curious mode. We are always, so our life becomes worthwhile, we become more interesting, we become more valuable once we remain curious. That means once we remain in the student mode, constant learning mode, life is always much more valuable, right?
Let's go there a moment, because I do find myself that way. I will agree with you as far as me. I am always wondering why this works this way and how this works and why we think this way. I'm very interested in that. But I don't find that a lot in others, Ratanjit. I don't find when I'm at work and working with all the and at this age of my life, everybody is younger than me. When I'm working with all the people who are younger than me, they don't have that same curiosity. They don't have that same interest in understanding why. You know, when I manage a situation, I need to know what's going on under the scenes. I need to know all the factors in play so I can manage it most effectively. So many people today don't have that curiosity. They don't care about what happens underneath the scenes. They just see, okay, this is what you want me to do. You want me to take this and do this with it. And you can't do that effectively unless you know the underlying reasons, the underlying principles of what you're doing. Do you notice? I mean, when you say that we are curious by nature, we're designed that way. Why is that being stifled in so many people today, if that truly is how we're designed?
What happens is we somehow, during the childhood, upbringing makes us feel inferior when we ask a question. So that makes us, there are people who are very shy in asking a question because that shows that they don't know enough. So, but that is the hunger of your mind. You're hungry for answers. So when you basically follow that path of not asking question and just protecting your false ego and making yourself feel a little better by not asking questions, you basically diminish your own self-worth, your self-requirement. So as a consequence, if you take that to the nth degree, it leads you to depression. It leads you to stress. It leads you to all these ailments. We have close to 40 to 60 million people who are taking antidepressant drugs. So there are many people who are not analyzed. So we have a society, or civilized society, the richest nation in the world, basically have more depressed people. So our education system, our upbringing has not addressed this first need of our inner curiosity and never transformed us into a true student. As a consequence, we pay a very high price for this.
I think you have touched on a topic here that is really more important than maybe it seems on the surface. I'm not saying it's all the reason for all the people being on antidepressants, because there's a lot of things going on in our world that cause that. But I think this is an absolute factor, because I can say over and over again how many times this scenario has played out, and I mistook that for not caring. It never crossed my mind that the people that weren't asking questions, that weren't acting curious, it was because they were shy about asking questions, that they didn't want to feel inferior, admit that they were possibly inferior, which of course they weren't, but in their mind, mistaking that as inferiority because they had a question. I never put that scenario together in my head. But now that I kind of replay those in my head, I see that really was a part of it. Maybe all of it. It's a major point. And then the other half of that is to say that, what does that do to you as a person if you stifle that creativity, if you stifle that curiosity because you're afraid to be who you are, you're afraid to ask the questions, you're afraid to admit that you don't know what you don't know, and so you're missing out on the learning, you're missing out on the joys of understanding things at a much deeper level so you can add more value. I mean, it truly does make sense that causes a harm in our human system, not to be able to put all those pieces together properly. And if you know, as you always say, like if you try to drive a car in reverse, if you do it the way it's not designed, you're going to have problems. You can see how that could lead to things such as depression then, if you don't feel fulfilled by that. It's really, I had to elaborate a little further because I think it's an extremely important point that you've brought out here that I've never thought of before. Never thought of that our unwillingness to show that curiosity, how that could be harmful to us as human beings.
So there is another side of this to understand this. Human system is designed to, we feel much better when we are useful, when we can achieve certain things, we can add value. So there are two aspects of it. Either you achieve something and add value. Achieving something necessary does not add value, but you feel better about yourself when you achieve. Your ego system allow you or ask you to have some trophies, some titles, some accolades. And so until you understand our real purpose of life, why we are created, we are all, ultimately, we are all universally powered by the same force. So the intelligence which has created us, universal psychology which has created us, is exactly the same. Doesn't matter whether you're male, female, old, young, black, white, or different nationality. So this psychology, when you see it in its without presence of mind, you see the psychology in nature. You see in fruit trees, you see in flower bushes. So all these plants, eventually, when they get nutrition, sun, and everything, ultimately produce the fruit and flowers. But so that's what they are designed to do. And they don't hold these flowers for themselves. So you have never seen an apple tree eat an apple. So ultimately, this psychology which has designed even us, we are here to produce fruit of success based on our unique talent, uniqueness. And once we produce these things, they really need to add value, which for us to make our own self enhance. Now, in the human being, because amazing brain is gifted to us, it needs new tools to elevate or adding value. So new tools enter us from the route of curiosity, from the route of knowledge, from the route of new learning. So if you stop that path, your capacity to add the highest value diminishes, and your own self ends up being sacrificed, right?
And it's I want to say that's brilliant, but I know you won't appreciate that term. That the wisdom that you just shared is astounding, because both of those factors by themselves are powerful. Adding value, dedicating your life to that. Anybody who's ever done that, even for a moment, maybe some people have done it for a lifetime, but even if you've done it for a moment, you know the fulfillment that you get. You know the inner gratification and fulfillment that you get from whatever you did when you did it without regard for what I'm going to get in return, and is it fair in the principles of life, that does that person deserve me to be good to them, and all those craziness. If you just genuinely add the highest value, you know the fulfillment. Now you've elevated that with a second thought. You added that to say, in order to do that properly, you need to be in a continuous mode of learning, which, according to you, isn't really difficult, because if we're designed to be curious, then we should be designed to want to learn. It should fall in path the same way. But as I mentioned earlier, I think so many people have been stifled by that. Maybe, I'm not even sure exactly all the reasons. You've mentioned a couple possibilities of that. We probably could explore that in detail, why some people don't want to learn, why some people are hesitant to be curious. That could make for an interesting long-term conversation. But for whatever the reasons are, if they've stifled that, then at the very core, it's hindered their ability to add the highest value. Because unless you're continuously opening your eyes to learning new ways and new ideas, and staying up with the world, I mean, if for no other reason than this world is changing at a speed that we have never anticipated could be possible, with technology and with communications and the way we live our lives at such an incredible pace, if you're still operating and adding the highest value mode the way you did 5 years ago, you're probably not adding the highest value today to most people's lives the way they need to be touched, because our whole world has just changed so much. For example, since the pandemic, I mean, you see it from your perspective, but if you're in the business world today, you know that almost nothing the way you did it 5 years ago is the way you do it today.
Yes.
I mean, so if you're not willing to be curious and learn more ways, you're out of luck. I mean, you're not going to be effective. You're not going to have the ability to add value to people's lives.
Yeah, no, you're not going to survive. So you need
You're not going to survive. You're right. In business, you're not going to survive if you didn't keep up with it.
So I think we need to take a break.
We do need to take a break. I hope I'm not the only one that thinks there has been some very important things that you have shared with us today already that really deserve more thought and consideration. And hopefully we'll have a few more of those moments coming up in the rest of the show. Please stay with us. We'll be right back on Stress Free Living. All right. Pierre, thank you for being with us. Welcome. Does anybody have a thought here for us during our break?
I have a couple of thoughts listening to Mr. Sandi. I think one of the most important things is you talked about why someone is not willing to learn, right? I think that's where the ego gets in the way. To me, is we have to be on a continuous learning journey, and by doing so, you actually can demonstrate a behavior that you want others. You can show it. If you want to lower that level of resistance to learning, right? Because you were asking that question. I think having the vulnerability to be out there, to put it out there, and really be in a learning mode, learning from everyone that you meet, because there's wisdom in everybody and everything around us. And you're going to have the vulnerability and the humility to learn from those things. And by doing that, you demonstrate that activity, that behavior, that value to others, and you propagate that forward. It's not, you can't do it by telling people what to do. You have to show them what to do, and you have to be in that vulnerable mode, so where you're not really pushing it. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Sure does. Sure, absolutely.
Very good.
Yes, we will talk about that because I think you're actually you need to be humble at both the teaching side and the student side.
Yeah.
So definitely we'll talk about that. Anybody else have a quick thought? It's okay if you don't. We're about to go back. We are back. This is Stress Free Living with Ratanjit and Ray, yours truly, Ray Samich. Thank you so much for being with us. And we do have an amazing Zoom audience that is always with us. And we encourage you, if you would like to be a part of that, and that allows us to interact with people. We see their faces, we talk with them one-on-one and as a group collectively before, after, and during the show. So if you would like to be part of that special group, we invite you, and just contact us through all the different ways that you can reach us, through Facebook or YouTube or through the radio station website, and we will get that link to you so that you can be a part of our program every week at a very deep level. And speaking of that, Ratanjit, one of the people that is with us, one of our wonderful guests, talked about humility and ego as part of this sequence. And I wanted to start with that. I think it's really important. You have to be humble to learn. Okay. If you're cocky and arrogant and you think you know it all, then obviously you're not in a mindset to learn. But you also have to have humility to teach, don't you? If your ego gets in the way when you're the teacher, that also prevents you from being effective.
Yes, true. So, you know, we talk about ego and it comes in the way and all that. So imagine if you seeing a 17, 18-year-old kid, young lady.
Okay.
She's so obsessed under that age, impressing the whole world about her beauty, about her being. So all her time, her ego and all that is basically based on how pretty she is. So she's constantly looking for compliments and constantly doing things which are going to impress others. So she falls in love, and eventually she gets married, and nature blesses her with beautiful little child. Now, when she transforms into mother, her priority shifts from wonderful looking, beautiful, and everything else, which is to welfare of the child.
Mm-hmm.
So when she's doing things for the child, her ego does not come in the way, which used to come in every decision she used to make. So now, once your purpose of life is so overwhelming that it basically leaves no room for ego, you suddenly become a person who basically focuses on adding value. In mother's case, she focuses on adding value. There are so many new things we learned as a mother. So how to take care, how to make her better, and all that. So she's continuously listening, reading, and understanding what is best for the kid. So ultimately, now there are good mothers and there are bad mothers. There are situations where the ego and self-worth does come in your way to becoming a good mother. And so that is a part of thing which I need to mention. But ultimately, this power of a purpose is very compelling. So in our life, the first thing which has to be there is a purpose. So when your purpose of life is to get a better job, when your purpose of life is to make more money, purpose of life is to impress others, your curiosity is going to take a certain level. So when your purpose is tied to adding the highest value unconditionally, which only happens when you find your true self. So ultimately, there is being curious happens realistically when you find your purpose. To find your purpose, you have to discover who you truly are. And until you discover that, your true purpose of life is not open to us, not available to us. So it is all based on ego. There are many people who add value basically because of their ego. There are many people who are in this country. There's over 400 billion people, $400 billion are collected by charity. This is the most charitable nation in the world. $170 billion are contributed from volunteers and their time value, and so on. So we constantly give. Most of the giving happens as a result of feeling yourself better. So when you feel somebody sick or somebody you can help. So corporations end up less than $40 million of $40 billion of contribution, whereas individuals give more than 70% of the charity.
Wow.
So it's amazing. So ultimately, there are three things. Until you find your true self, your real purpose is not available to you. Right?
Well, I still want to stay with curiosity a little bit, because I think if you're talking about why you want to learn, there has to be a curiosity to do that. So I think it is a very important part of this conversation. You just said curiosity isn't there unless you really have your purpose, unless you really know your purpose. And I'm going to respectfully disagree. I think there can be a level of curiosity, even if you don't know your purpose, even if you're not trying to add value. And I think this goes back to where you said we're designed to be curious. Okay. So if you overcome, the feelings of, I'm afraid to admit that I don't know something. So if you take that out of the picture, and the people that are afraid to show that they think they may be inferior by not knowing it, so remove that. But I think otherwise we are curious. Most of us are curious. Most of us want to, they want to look things up. They want to do research. They want to ask questions of others who they think know the answers. I think we are naturally curious. I do totally agree with you. And I don't think many of those people that are curious even have an awareness of what is the purpose of my life. And they don't have an awareness of, I should be adding the highest value as my purpose. I think most of them are just genuinely curious. They just want to know what and why and how things work. And so my point of all of this is that the really important stuff that we should be curious about, that is the most fulfilling, that is the most purposeful in our life, I don't think we're asking those questions until we understand the purpose. But I think we are curious even as far, stupid things, okay? Things that really don't matter, but we still have that curiosity about us. And the humility factor, I think, comes in on the important things, but I think we're curious, even a bunch of guys hanging out together, high school kids hanging out together, they're curious on all kinds of things that they talk about. Okay. and they are meaningless. They and they're not afraid to say, I don't know this, or what is this all about, because they're counting on each other to help fill in the answers to whatever they're curious about. You follow my gist? I think you've made the biggest point earlier that says we are curious by nature, even if we're not curious for the right things, even if we're not asking the right questions, we do want to know what's going on.
Basically, this gift of curiosity, which we are born with.
Yeah.
Okay, if it is not properly channeled, if you use this curiosity without a purpose, you are going to end up experimenting with drugs and with this and that. The curiosity leads you to the wrong path.
Okay.
So until you understand your real purpose of life, your curiosity, which is a tremendous value to you, becomes a problem. So until curiosity is directed by your mission, your purpose, you do not use this talent to collect the right information. And you internally do not feel self-worth because this information which you are feeding does not elevate you. So because lack of self-worth, you end up being depressed, you end up being marginalized, you end up being shy, you end up being all kinds of problems. So until you understand the real purpose of life, now again, purpose again is very dicey. So yes, many times when my purpose is to make more money. My purpose is to gain more fame. My purpose is to impress my partner. My purpose is to all this. So those are all five senses directed.
Mm-hmm.
The real purpose is not available to you until you are directed by your soul, by your spirit, which is present within you. So that is where I transfer into knowing yourself. So knowing yourself means that either I am my ego, my five senses, my human body and brain, or I am the enlivening force, which is basically gives life to this human body. So the direction of body mode is always towards me. So my purpose is what is in it for me. So when you are in the spiritual mode, the divine power, which is enlivening you mode, the direction becomes from you to others. How do I add value? So direction changes. So basically, until you find yourself, true self, the purpose is misguided and your curiosity is misguided, right?
You must have got a good night's sleep last night, Ratanjit, because you really have a handle on this better than ever. You took my last comments and you just explained it so beautifully, so simply, but so perfectly, in that my comments about curiosity were truly referring to people who were driven by their five senses. Okay. And I mentioned the group of guys getting together and being curious about things. Okay. But our whole life is an example of that. If we are trying to find ways of adding pleasure to our life through our five senses, things that feel good, sound good, look good, whatever it is, then those aren't the meaningful curiosities that we're designed to be implementing. Those are things that just satisfy our body mode, and they're short term, and we attain them, we learn them, we expand on the curiosity and we get fulfilled, but we only get fulfilled at the human level. And again, that probably leads to depression. Okay, it's like a drug addict. You mentioned drugs. We're curious about drugs. Well, if this drug gives us this high and then we've attained it, well, what about this drug? Or what about, something stronger or something different? Will that get us where we want to be? Because we're in this body mode of pleasure and curiosity to fulfill the pleasure. You stated this so simply and yet so accurately, that we're driven by these human curiosities for pleasure purposes of our five senses, and we're losing what is supposed to be fulfilling, what is supposed to go along with the purpose of who we really are. And if we're all so bogged down in curiosities of our body, or no curiosity at all, as we talked about even earlier, because those have been stifled, it's no wonder we're on antidepressants. It's no wonder why we commit suicide. It's no wonder why we're miserable in our lives, because such an important core aspect of our lives we're not even executing on. It makes so much sense if you really just think about it. We are stress-free living, and if we're living outside of what makes sense, it causes stress, whether we know it or not. It's eating away at our heart, it's eating away at our bodies, and all of our important aspects of this amazing computer that we have been gifted with. So we're trying to relieve the stress and understand why we think the way we do and why we act the way we do, and perhaps more importantly, what we should be doing, whether we're 20 or 80 or above or below or anywhere in between. We can still turn it around and reduce the stress in our lives. We will be back in just a moment with wrapping this show up. Stress-free living. Stay right where you're at. Okay, we've got a short break here, and then we have a short segment. Ratanjit, anybody like to weigh in?
It just sounds like it's the same conversation. This is Kim from Chicago, that Ratanjit and you guys talk about all the time: oneness versus feeding our ego in a quest, no matter what the quest is, whether it's career, relationship, or anything. If you're not in touch with the oneness with other people and what your true purpose is, you're just feeding your ego, and it's an empty container. So you're flying down the journey looking for a destination only to arrive and to be disappointed. That's what this sounds like to me. Absolutely. Versus enjoying every step and appreciating yourself and others as you move towards whatever it is you're moving towards is empty and meaningless any other way. That's what's coming up for me.
Absolutely.
Yep. You're right. We know they're all similar paths. We know we end up in the same place, but it just seems like we find, to me, new windows to enter into the journey through. We have another 30 seconds probably, if anybody would like to weigh in. If not, we'll wrap it up. And please stay with us afterwards. We'd love to hear and talk with you more in depth afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about the alignment, right? The alignment with your values, the alignment with your purpose. And that's really where you generate the most value, and you serve to a higher level. And I think that's very important. And it gives you the most inner peace that you could have. That to me is, creating that alignment is going to be critical, and maintaining it over time with all the stresses and all the distraction you get in life. Staying true to that is very important.
Very good. Thank you. This is Stress-Free Living. Ray Samich and Ratanjit Sandhi with you. Thank you so much for being with us. Talking again during our break with some of our wonderful Zoom guests. And a couple of thoughts there, Ratanjit. I'm going to put those together from them as we proceed here with our final segment. One is that the idea that this is a journey, and that for the people that may be listening to this that say, you know, I haven't been doing this, I'm not sure how to make this transition. It may not be something that you can go and suddenly change midstream if you've been doing something else for 50 years. But like everything else in life, it's a journey, right? I mean, we have to appreciate the fact that we are transitioning constantly and learning constantly. And so to try to set a new path for ourselves should be something that we should enjoy and not look at with fear or intimidation. It should be saying, hey, let me see if I can start being curious about the right things in terms of my purpose, as opposed to curiosity for my senses.
That's very true, Ray. Ultimately, to become a better student, we are all in the same boat, and constantly learning. So how come the same information, in the classroom, teacher gives the same information, so suddenly the level of understanding is different by different students. So our ultimate managing is your own self. Ultimately, when you to control the world, you have to control yourself. You can only control anything around you if you know how to control yourself. Excuse me. So ultimately, that we have mentioned in our shows, our mind is very powerful tool. It's amazing. So ultimately, we have been told that mind is your master, whereas mind is truly your servant. Who is the master? You are the master. If you do not discover the real you, the servant is going to rule your life. If you remain in coma, you remain hidden, who is going to take over? Your mind. Your mind is directed, in absence of the real you, your five senses. So my body tells, okay, find me something which I can enjoy, eat. So mind is going to go and find these things. So if you tell your mind, find me something which is more nutritious, so it is going to find you. So mind is basically gives you the answer. It is an amazing computer, but we haven't found the right boss which is going to control this mind, which is going to guide this mind in the right way. So until all our life, this thought process is not easy, what I'm saying, to do. And coming back to your thought process, this mind-driven whole system which we have been fed is all destination-driven. Get a degree, you have reached a destination. Get a job, you have reached a destination. Get married, you have reached a destination. So suddenly destinations are increasing or moving forward. But ultimately, life is a journey. So journey only happens through understanding who you are. Mind is always want to reach and conclude. So mind is not part in the journey mode. The boss, real boss, is part in the journey mode. And mind is given certain projects and it achieves the project. It gives you a new project, continuing the journey. But journey only happens by understanding who you are, right?
One more quick thought, Ratanjit, expressed from one of our guests, was the idea of values, the values that we have planted in us. And from my experience, most of those values are planted by those around us in our environment, our parents, our friends, those that are influencing us, especially as children. And then many times those values then become planted for the rest of our lives. What if we haven't had the values planted in our lives that really allow us to want to add the highest value? I mean, what if we've grown up in a difficult environment where everybody had to look out for themselves? They weren't able to be in the mode of serving others because they had to make sure that they had what they needed for their own survival, mentally and physically. Okay, how do those people in that difficult situation transition to a mindset of adding highest value for others? Is that more complicated for those that don't have maybe the backbone of values of adding the highest value for everyone?
See, value system comes from two sources. One is the worldly sources, which is your parents give you value, your school give you values, your faith gives you values, and your society and rules and laws gives you value. So that value system is borrowed. That is not your own value system. So that value system is always going to be traded. Somebody has different price on it. Somebody would trade those values for $1. Somebody will trade that value for $1,000. Somebody would trade their value for $1 million. Somebody would trade their value for $1 billion. But that is always remains tradable. So because they are borrowed, the true value system is not available to us until you discover your true self. Your true self, which is your spiritual being, gives you the value. So once you realize who you are, I also realize that the same enlivening force exists in you. So you and I are the same. So why would I ever lie to you? Suddenly, automatically, the truth happens. Suddenly, all those, I don't have to practice. I don't have to remind myself. So I should tell the truth. So, and I continuously, how to add value, become curious and learn more and add value. So our value system, which is planted in us, is not available to us until we discover the source of our value system, which is the real me, the divine power which enlivens me, which makes me who I am. This car, which is given to us, the human body, which is a vehicle I use to implement it. I am not me. When you die, they say it is his body, which is here. So who is that person who died? The spiritual being which has come out of you, the power which comes out of you, and this body is dead. All the organs are present in it. Still, it cannot operate without that energy of the divine power within it. So our real self is our power, which only gives us the true values, right?
Ratanjit, we'll let that be our last word today. Thank you so much for sharing so many amazing thoughts with all of our listeners. And we appreciate all of you being out there, especially our Zoom guests. extra special to us, but all of you, however you may be listening or watching, we really value you. Thank you for being a part of the show. Remember, we're all playing the same game. We'll talk to you real soon.
Thank you.
All right, we are clear. And Pierre and Kim, boy, we are sure glad you're with us here today. We'd be mighty lonely without the two of you. So thanks for being with us. And go ahead, you've got the floor if you'd like to share some thoughts.
No, this is awesome. I try to make this. I have it on my calendar, and sometimes I get some conflicting commitments. But we talk about this a lot. It all goes. I agree with Mr. Sandi. The value system is it's not. It can't be. It can't be monetized. It shouldn't be monetized. And I think that's where a lot of us can, you talked about the environment and the impact of the environment on the values. And I can tell you that if you monetize it, then I would agree with you. Then that becomes the driver. But for someone who came from a war-torn country, to me is if you think about it in an obsolete, it becomes sometimes the tough environment drives you to understand your values more than when you're living in an environment that it's that have all the amenities. It gets you to be a lot more introspective about your values and what drives you in life. And when you see a lot of people being hurt and dying and for no reason of really in the world for that to happen, it gives you a little different view on life and what your role is to drive into humanity something that is a lot higher than can I live to the next day so I can do this or that or the other. So I think your upbringing has something to do with it. You get help on the way, right? We all get help on the way, but I think sometimes once you start to understand that fundamental drive to make things better, to help for no reason other than just doing it, the more you do it, the more that journey continues, right? So it's not an end on its own, but I think it's critical on the path. Otherwise, you'll start to have a circular discussion, and you'll end up, a lot of people want to talk about these things, and talk is pretty easy. Demonstrating it in an environment where a lot of times people don't get it is where the biggest challenge is, and I think that's where we can make the biggest impact.
Thank you, Pierre.
Yep, agreed. Kim, go ahead.
Pierre, your words resonate with me because, I wasn't in an environment where people were physically, well, sometimes casualties were happening, but not a war-torn environment. But I feel like a suburban mom or an inner city kid raising suburban kids. So my drive and tenacity and resilience and awareness, is much greater than my kids because I really worked hard to put them in environments that were very different from where I came up. And some of our most stressful conversations was because they just did not understand. And then it occurred to me, I did a good job. Like I got them into a better environment, better schools, but then it became my job. How do I connect the dots so that they don't forget, what really matters? And, my son, I remember saying, the students in the schools where I go now, they speak differently. Or he would laugh when he would go to the inner city when he was young. And he went to a summer job once, and there were 80 kids in the city of Cleveland in this room, majority from the inner city. And he called me, he said, Mom, half of these kids, they can't read, they don't speak well. And I said, look around that room. Every one of them looks like you. You have the privilege of being educated and growing up in an environment that's different from theirs. But someday you may be sitting at a table making a decision regarding policies, regarding programs, regarding resources that will be available or not for these kids. More importantly, there are people at those tables right now that don't have a clue about what it's like to live there, and we have family there. So your job is to now become a liaison between the two, because you have the privilege and opportunity to be able to communicate in both environments. But getting that fire lit within his heart the way it's lit in mine as a person who lived it, who went through it, is something that I deal with every day. So I appreciate the comments and the opportunity to share. Yeah.
Thank you. It's you are very fortunate and you are very gifted that you converted your difficulties into the right manners. A lot of people gets tainted and become very bitter about it, rather than using these gifts which are given to us in the form of troubles, and ended up changing us into a good human being, and which you have been able to do. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Or they give up, Kim. They just become hopeless. They just think there's no way of changing it. I think, from my perspective, I see so many people that came up like that, and they just have no hope. They've been stifled so much. They just feel like this is my rut. And obviously you prove every day that that's not the case. As Ratanjit said, your environment, has a big effect on your values, but it's what's inside of you that really matters. And obviously what's inside of you coming out of a difficult environment has allowed you to flourish. And now you've changed generations to come because of how you've done it. So
I'm still doing it. I appreciate the acknowledgement. There are two models that I live by. When I get scared and worried, I say, God holds tomorrow. Yes. So either I'm going to have faith or I'm going to have fear. Yes. So I choose to have faith. That's one. And the other thing, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And just as much as it's an opportunity for the kids in those terrible environments, I believe that there are people with hearts at the table that can create change or opportunities for others, and they really just don't get it. So it's an opportunity to also educate them, to open up their minds and expand their perspective. I'd like to talk to them. I get that there are people who may not be open to that, but for those who are, those are the people that I'm interested in connecting with and helping them understand how to build that bridge and to make things better for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's like we talked about being a role model as you go on this journey. You have to be able to demonstrate to folks that things can continue to get better. You demonstrate the right behavior that get them to connect with that fire that's within us, that a lot of times gets so muddied up, that energy that's within each one of us. And I tell you, it's our responsibility. And I feel this is it's my mission. As in every interaction that I make, it is important to be able to demonstrate the level at which your commitment is about value and to help. I don't want to say I want to help people get better. I just want to create a better way, a better environment, anything that you can touch, that you can impact folks, people at the core, not just so they can feel better and then you feel better and life is good and you move on. Yeah, I just made somebody happy today. Really create something that's foundationally, fundamentally better, right? And create that ecosystem. But it requires energy. It requires your energy and we're talking about commitment and drive and all this stuff. It's what you're willing to put in it every day. Not, well, today I'm going to do this. Tomorrow, no, I'm going to be too tired. It's a lifelong journey where you're going to be doing it every day in every interaction with no days off. It's how you're wired as a human being, that every day you get up and going to say, I'm going to make something better, and I'm going to do it for no other reason than creating value and doing things better around me. And this way, when you touch people, you can start to propagate that, and you start to create disciples that believe, that can help you on that journey that makes it better. So all these things that you do in your life, yeah, the promotion, the title, all these things are just gifts that you're getting so you can keep going on that journey so you can deliver bigger and better value.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ray, my job is online. Pierre is going to take over.
Pierre and Kim,
Yeah.
why don't you guys
I don't know
host
about that.
Pierre and Kim can be the host and the two co-hosts next week.
Yeah.
We'll move them up to the top squares and we'll come down to the bottom squares.
Oh, I don't know about that. I truly, I really, listen, I want to thank you both for providing this opportunity. It to me is when it's like reconnecting back and provide, because a lot of times you run and there's times where you doubt that what you're doing is making a difference, right? Now, the more you do it, the more change you create, the more energy that you generate to keep you going forward. But I tell you, we're human beings, and there's times where you get doubts. Am I making a difference? Is my approach working? It's, is my mission in life, am I achieving those things that I'm here to do? And reconnecting with you and Mr. Sandi, it just helps me kind of recharge the batteries and know, you know what? No, we're good. I think, I'm gonna keep moving, and it's making a difference, and it's helping me continue down this journey. And I tell you, yeah, it's hard, but it's when you look back and you see some of the things that have moved to a better place, the people that you impacted that are now doing some of the things that you've helped them do, it feels good. It feels that we're heading in the right direction.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm right there with you. For so many years, I had self-worth and net worth collapsed, and coming from so far below, I feel. No education, teenage mom, raised by a widow, scarce resources, in the home and the community. There were so many times where I could have quit, but that's precisely why I don't quit on others who come from the same environment, because I know the only reason why I'm here is because somebody prayed for me. Yep. Somebody prayed for me. Somebody made a phone call. Somebody opened a door, made a recommendation. And I am that coach that will not quit. As long as they're willing participant, I will stand for them, because I know what it's like to have somebody do that for me. But one thing I love that you said weeks ago, Pierre, was you cannot be bought. And I'm a beautiful woman. And I'm so proud to say I cannot be bought. I stand firmly, I stand with integrity, and I keep fighting even when it hurts. And there have been times in the storm where I wondered if I should keep going. But that's when I turn and I say, God holds tomorrow. I'm going to have the faith, and I'm going to keep going. But it is a gift to come to environments like this and to have the privilege to be in this conversation that is reassuring while I'm on my way. So I carry in my heart these conversations and these nuggets that Ray and Ratanjit share, with us as I'm fighting that fight every day. So thank you. And also you, Pierre. My gosh, I remember you saying that. And I thought, yeah, that's me. Because I actually had a person say to me, you and your good morals are going to file bankruptcy. You could have it all if you would just, accept my request. And I said, no, thank you. Yeah. I'm not going to compromise my integrity. I'm committed to what I'm doing. And he was right. It would have been so easy to take the check.
Isn't that always the case? Yeah, listen, we always get a lot of help on the way, and I think that's where the humility have to come in. Yep. 30 some years ago, God put Mr. Sandi in my way, and my life have not been the same since. And I was a young engineer, and I've said this story many times. But I declined a big job with a car. I was this 22-year-old that had and my dad thought I was crazy. I met Mr. Sandi in this interview. We didn't even talk about how much he's going to pay me. And I got out of there and said, that's what I'm going to work. And I don't care what he pays me. It really doesn't matter. But there was that connection. So I truly believe that there's this, whatever you want to call it. You want to call it a superpower. You want to call it a guardian angel. You call it whatever you want. But there's somebody there that's helping us on this way. And if you accept it, and if you actually get it, you understand. If you look back on your life and you see there's critical points, inflection points in your life, and I can point to these so clearly because I am that much more aware of how I never asked for the help, right? But I don't know how it is, but it just, people at certain times come up in your life and they help you go to that next level. But you have to accept that help, right? You have to be vulnerable enough that you say, yeah, I can use that help and I can learn from everybody. And I definitely, I will tell that to anyone that I meet and we talk about. I said, there is, my parents are very important to me, right? But the next step, when I start thinking about people that have impact on my life, Mr. Sandi comes up on the top of the list. And I'm not telling him that because he's here, but I'm telling you what I have learned and how it helped me transform my life as I grew, as I become a professional, as I had responsibilities that become extremely large. The fact that I was able to build relationships from folks that come from nowhere, right? These are I had people working for me that were, they just barely make ends meet. But by the time that I start to spend the time and I build relationships with these folks that till today, I still know them. I know their kids. I know their family. I visit them and where they live. People want to feel part of something bigger, right? But it was hard for someone who was 22, 23-year-old to get his head wrapped around that you have to do more to get to feel there's a bigger hole than what it is that you think about yourself. I was thinking about myself as an engineer, right? That was I studied, that's what I have, right? And I tell you, when the last thing I talk about today, when I talk to folks about anything about me, is my engineering degree. Seriously, that doesn't, because that was defining me. And I found out that that's not how I want to be defined, right? I want to be looked at a lot different. And the engineering degree is just a tool that helped me move from point A to point B at some point in time where that allowed me to deliver and help and do more than what I was doing in the past. So just some thoughts.
Yeah, nobody helped you. You are gifted, and you were able to pick up the right out of the dirt. You are able to pick up the right gems. So it's credit goes to you, not to anybody else.
Yeah, but it's I got a lot of help, Mr. Sandi, on the way. Everybody have eyes, but sometimes you might need the right glasses to be able to differentiate between, finding the gem and the rock, right?
Yeah.
So I truly believe that everybody in my life, from when I was born to today, have had a significant impact on me getting to where I'm at and on my journey of wherever I'm going, right? I'm just going to continue to do that and recognize that people in your life, you learn from everybody. We talk about learning. We learn from the janitor. You can learn, but you have to put your ego aside and tell someone that I don't understand. Help me. And when you approach it that way, in a non-threatening, condescending way, people will teach you things, right?
Absolutely.
And it's amazing the things you learn from folks. It's amazing the things you learn from walking, taking a walk in the park. You just, if you're observant enough and you're looking at things through the right lenses, you'll get to see the greatness of this world, the greatness of this power that puts us together, that put us here for a reason. And that's very, very, very important.
If I can share, Pierre, you said as far as whoever put you together with Ratanjit, someone passed a quote to me many years ago that I have repeated so many times. I want to share it with you too right now. Ratanjit's heard me say this before, but God sends many, many people in our path, but we choose who we allow to walk on by, who we reach out to, and who we absolutely refuse to let go of. And I think isn't that powerful? Okay.
You're
Yes,
absolutely right.
God sends them all, okay, but we ultimately choose, okay, who we let walk by, who we reach out to, and who we refuse to let go of. Okay.
Yeah.
Ratanjit in my life is that third person. I mean, I would never think of letting him go because he's just so valuable to us. So
Yeah.
use share that, if you will, with others, because I think that is just such a powerful statement of the choices we have in our life.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
there was
Will you put that in the chat, please, Ray?
Yes.
so there are two people who are doing so much good in this world. God appears to them, and he said, I have two items. And the one guy was working very hard, working with poor people and doing a really good job selflessly. And one guy was, of course, doing good, but mostly ego-driven. But they were both doing good job. So God gave the guy who was doing good jobs with ego-driven a diamond. And the guy who was doing with poor people and doing the genuine jobs and gave him a coal. So after they left, so somebody, assistant to God, said, God, this was injustice. Why would you give him a diamond and the other guy a coal? So the guy with the diamond, and he got the diamond, showed off the diamond, made, sold off that for big money and got rich. And the guy who got coal, the God gave me this. There has to be a purpose. There has to be a much deeper meaning. So he spent his life in understanding what is coal made of, what is coal real thing is. Coal is carbon. And once he discovered the essence of carbon, the atomic structure of carbon, he was able to discover his way to all the chemistry of the world, all the science of the world. So as a consequence, this information gave him much higher value than a diamond can ever have. So ultimately, this thing of the story is, until you find the real essence of a carbon, coal and diamond both are made of carbon. When you have diamond, you are inundated by its beauty and its value. When you have carbon, you don't realize the real value of the carbon, which is hidden in understanding what the value of atomic structure of carbon is. Once you understand, our entire science and technology was developed by that. So I don't know whether you understood what I meant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
It's learning the essence versus, kind of an output, because you can take the carbon and you'll make the diamond out of it.
Yes.
But you have to understand, right, fundamentally why that goes. And in that learning, there's a journey of learning, getting from the coal to a diamond. But if you get to the diamond, most people don't go back and say, well, let me go backwards to figure out how is that made. They're just enamored with that. And that takes away that entire path and journey of learning.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Teach the men to fish, right? Teach the men to fish. It's the gift that keeps on giving if you continue to be a student and you continue to learn. And oh my gosh, it's like popcorn popping for me right now, because it's not just about us becoming so self-absorbed. It's really about how we can be a contribution not only to ourselves, but to the world around us. And if we are all consuming, then it's limited. When Ratanji mentioned earlier, getting outside of ego and looking at how I can add value to others and how much more nourishing that is for my life. As a writer, as long as I was all about me, I had writer's block. But then when I started looking at empty frames and saying, who am I writing to? What difference do I want to make over there? Then it became much clearer to me what I needed to say.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, all of you.
Thank you. Well, thank
So-
you very much for all of you to join